Okay, hey everybody, Steve Burns here, Digital Creativity with Stephen Burns, aka Chrome Illusion. So we're here with the LightWave Users Group meeting today, and we have a very, very special presenter. So for all those out there who is into 3D and LightWave, um, this is the man who creates some absolutely phenomenal plugins for LightWave. He is the programmer from Origami Digital. So now Nightbot's going to be putting up those links there every so often. You'll see a link there for Origami Digital. Definitely check it out. Make sure that you guys follow this page so that every time I'm on doing a presentation in digital artistry, 3D or otherwise, you're going to be notified. So join on. And if you want to watch all the videos we ever created, just go on and subscribe. Subscribe and get access to all the videos. Almost 100 videos on the site there. And that's everything from Photoshop to 3D to compositing, After Effects, whatever I've been working on Twitch. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys. I know I just find this whole Twitch thing very fascinating. It's kind of a new opportunity to share and another opportunity for you guys to learn from those who are actually involved in the industry or teaching and otherwise. So it's about sharing knowledge, and that's what New Tech has always been about. The LightWave community has always been about sharing knowledge with one another. It's a unique community in the 3D world, and that's one of the reasons that was so attracted to it, was that everybody was always so helpful in sharing their knowledge. And again, so we're going to continue that spirit on. Good morning. We have a good morning, Chris Head. Good morning, Edibara, I think it is. Welcome to Digital Creativity with Stephen Burns. We're here with the LightWave Users Group. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead without further ado. Now we have Oliver's screen is up now. You're seeing his LightWave interface. And without further ado, I give you guys Oliver Hotz.
Hey guys, so for just a little of clarification maybe, but for people that don't know me, I started Origami Digital in 2004, and Origami Digital, besides what everybody thinks right now is a company that releases plugins, it's actually a visual effects boutique. And my primary job is still, I'm the owner and founder of Origami. I'm the visual effects supervisor, and I program in my free time essentially. So a lot of the tools that I'm going to be showing today are they were created because of issues that we ran in, or inefficiency that we ran into on projects. And so all of these tools are born out of production issues. They're not just grabbed out of thin air. And so I thrive on automating things, making things simpler, improving workflows for not just myself but also the people that work for me, or clients, and now a lot of users that specifically use LightWave. And also we don't just use LightWave, we use Modo, Maya, a whole bunch of different applications, but LightWave has always been, sort of my hub, and probably the application that I'm most comfortable in. It's not the application that I do everything, but it's the one I'm most comfortable in. It's a nice little hub. So with that, in 2015, I released the first tool set. It was called OD 2015. There was a lot of different tools. And with 2018 now, I released essentially the update to that, which combines everything from 2015 and 2018. And it's a massive tool set of roughly, I think, as of this morning, it was 428 tools, which is sort of ridiculous, and I know that. I've been told that, and it's hard to stop. There's always inefficiencies that you find even after 428 tools. So if you haven't gotten the older tool set, it's literally, if you look at the feature set of OD Tools 2018, it's massive, and you'll probably go, I won't need half of these, or maybe you do, or I've had comments where it's too big for me. It's like, it's overwhelming, and I think if you just look at the feature set, I think it's correct. It is overwhelming, and my advice would be for the people that look at it, don't look at it as a whole, but start very, very small. And most of the time, if you have something that some issue or some inefficiency that you run into in LightWave, that's when you check OD tools, and most likely you're going to find something to help you along the way. Stream is breaking up for me. Is it just me? Steven, are you monitoring?
I am. So there was no questions yet. Somebody was mentioning that the stream was breaking up for them. That's probably your bandwidth. I think everybody else is coming through fine, and that question was toward Morgan. But yeah, we're getting a fairly good stream reception. So it may be your bandwidth at your home or your area or something like that. So just be patient. I am recording this, so if you miss anything, you can come back and watch the recording. Go for it.
So in terms of, the toolset overwhelming and things like that, I'm going to start, very simple, and I'm going to start with something that I think everybody can use, and that's the preset system. So what I've done is I've taken some of the things that have annoyed myself for decades now, where you would have, in LightWave sort of, there's scenes that are separate, objects are separate from the scene, images are separate from the objects or the scene, MDDs are separate from that. So we're in other applications like Maya or Cinema 4D, when you save a project, you only have one file. In LightWave, a lot of different files make up a specific scene or an object or other things. So we're going to start with the scene presets. And what scene presets essentially are, you have a little control window here, and then you have something that you're used to from the LightWave surface preset system. And what the scene presets essentially are, if you normally have a scene open and you do a package scene, which comes with LightWave, if you just save and you do a package scene, it typically consolidates everything into a directory. Well, not everything, but most of the stuff that LightWave is aware of, consolidates it into a directory. And with that, you have everything self-contained in a folder. I've taken that a step further with presets, where everything is contained within the preset itself. So you actually only have one file that you can share. And if you share one of these presets with another artist, they get the thumbnail and everything that belongs to it. So here, for example, I have a couple different, I have an end light scene. So if I wanted to have a default scene with an environment light set up, I can just click on it. You'll be presented with, do you want to load the scene, load from scene, or import the scene's objects only? So here we're going to do load from scene. And you can see now that you have an environment light in here. This could be anything though. Let's say we want to have this skin open gel, which is one of the content scenes. And that loaded right in. The important thing about that is anything that's stored in here is packaged all together. You never have to find on disk where are the objects located that belong to the scene, or where are the images that belong to the scene. Because maybe you load something from you load a scene setup from a different project, and maybe that project is no longer in the location that it used to be when you actually were working on that project. So everything is always self-contained. If you wanted to load a character in, go to the scenes here. If you wanted to load one of the characters, you can do that. And with that, everything that's loaded is in here. So the character, the bones, the images that belong to the character, everything is just separated in one preset file. And it essentially loads that into your content structure that you currently have active. So in this particular case, if we go to the content here and we just see that the path is just desktop.xx, and if we go there, you can now see that, for example, the boy is in there. There is, the scenes are in there, the images that belong to the boy are there. Everything got copied into that folder. So you never have to worry about external dependencies, like where things are stored or where they used to be stored. So that's scene presets. And again, whether it's particles or just load a particle scene here to show this. So here's a little particle scene setup that, particles just floating. Again, you never specified where's my content folder, where is the, what used to be the content folder when it was loaded in, all these kind of things. Can Oliver create a preset to show how it's done? Yes. So, for example, if let's just load any of them here. I'm just going to make a scene here with 3 items, for example. Very, very, very simple. Let me just go to. Unfortunately, my screen, it really annoys me that I can't use my full screen resolution. But so here's, for example, a simple scene. All you have to do is call it 3 items, for example, and just do add preset. And you can now see that the thumbnail is created from whatever the thumbnail was that you had active. You can click on here and you can right click and you can say set name. You can change the name. You can also just add some description here. Something with 3 items. And so now you actually have that. So if you clear the scene and let's say you want to load it again, there you go. You now have that scene back in. If you wanted to import the character into that scene, you just do load from scene in this particular case, because we want to keep the original scene. And there's your character that's added. Oops. Select the boy. So here now we have the character that's added into. Where does it save the preset scenes to? In case you want to back up the preset scenes. So again, the preset scenes itself, all of this is wherever you have your preset stored. By default, that's in the users config. Hold on, let me show you where that is. Let's go in here. So, in my particular case, the configs are stored in the in this particular folder. Normally, it would be C users, your username, and then the .newtek folder. And you can see there's an OD presets folder in here, and the OD presets folder encapsulates all the presets that I have. So in this particular case, we are dealing with a scene preset. And you can see, for example, I saved this into the workspace library. You can have different libraries, which you can name. But in the workspace library, you get silly names like this. There's nothing I can do about that. That's just the way the LightWave preset system works. But that's where the preset is stored, and you can see the different file sizes. The nice thing about it is all these are stored compressed. So it's essentially using zip compression to compress whatever the output was and put that into a thumbnail or into the whole preset system. So that's where they are stored. If you wanted to know one specific item, the way it currently is, and I'm saying currently because there might be some changes there, you can move this. Let's say you can create a new library, and let's just call that library transfer. And go back to the workspace, and let's just say we wanted to transfer the boy preset. We'll copy it to the transfer library. And if we go back to our preset folder, 1 second. We go back to our presets folder. Here is the scene presets. There is now a transfer, and this would be the preset. And again, if you take that preset, attach it in an email, and send it to somebody else, anybody else that has this sort of that has my preset system, they can just drop it in and now have the same exact preset. So everything, again, you don't have to worry about, did I send them the object or the images that belong to the object or the images that belong to a particle setup. Any of that kind of stuff is encapsulated in the preset, and that is being passed on. The preset system will only work with 2018. That's one of the questions. There's some tools that, or probably about half of the tools, maybe 3/4 of the tools, work in 2015, but the majority of the systems, and thanks for asking actually, because as we go through these, I'm going to specify what works and what doesn't work. they only work in 2018. There is a lot of work by the LightWave developers that was being done to make this actually possible by a third party. There were a lot of limitations of the preset system before because it was never meant to be used in that capacity. But 2018 opened a lot of those up, and I'm very thankful for that. How do you set up a custom preset folder? Yeah, so again, by default, this is in your users folder, which a lot of times is on your local drive. Maybe you don't want to fill up your local drive. If you go to the preferences here, under paths in 2018, again, since this only works in 2018, you have an edit location list. And here you can actually add all kinds of different presets, so or different preset paths. And these will show up here as something else. So we can do that real quick. So let's just add one on the desktop. Call it user group presets. And user group. And we can do the add. Oh, yeah, so yeah, it's a little bit misleading, I guess. So when you do add new presets, it'll actually ask you for this. So now you can see that they're actually in here, and you can see in here now you have a new section. This user always will point to your local config, so the C users new username new tech folder, and the new user presets would be now in a new location, and that could be anywhere. It could be on a network drive. It could be a Dropbox folder that you have shared with other people. So that way they all have access to the same presets. And a nice thing, the way the preset system works is as soon as you add a preset in here, it will automatically, if somebody else on a different machine has the same preset location open, it will automatically show up on their end. Same thing as you remove them. So hopefully that answers Carlos' question. And again, this is for scene presets, which probably out of all of the preset systems, I don't want to say it's the least useful, but it's the least exciting, because I feel like that's something that a user should never have to worry about, you know, when you want to transfer things on. So with that, if anybody has any questions about the scene presets, type them in now, because I'm going to move forward. Or I'm going to move forward regardless and come back to the scene presets if somebody has questions. So we're going to say, actually, let's just remove this. That's how you remove a location, and you can see it automatically was removed here. So let me go back and set the path to my XX folder. The next preset, so we can remove that. These are all master plugins, so you know you can leave them. They're not saved with the scene. They're just real quick. The thumbnails automatically created. Yes, the thumbnails are automatically created. If whatever you have in your viewport is what's being used as a thumbnail. Whether if you have no VPR enabled, you'll just get the OpenGL view. If you have VPR enabled, actually let's just do that. Let's go back to the scene. And let's just enable VPR. And so, for example, if we add this scene again, you can now see that it uses the VPR preset. You can also, at any point in time down the road, you know, if this wasn't the framing that you wanted, and you just rather do something like that, you can always replace the thumbnail with VPR. And now you have the new thumbnail. So that's you know, because a lot of times it's actually important that it works with VPR and OpenGL, but by default it's whatever your viewport is, or whatever your active viewport is currently set. So even if you have a quad view, whichever, so if you do a quad view here, whatever your active viewport is being set, that's what's being used for the thumbnail creation. Again, OpenGL or VPR. Or any of the buffers, you know, if you do any of the, if you wanted to use that as a thumbnail, that's what's being used. You know, whatever is visible at the time. Let's see, any other questions? No. So the next natural thing, and I think more important thing almost, is object presets. So, or we call them model, or I call them model presets. So we're going to close this here, and we're going to go to the model library. So model library is exactly the same thing essentially as presets, but it's model specific. Is there a model on how big the scene? No, there's no limitation other than what you have available on your disk. So whatever your free memory is on the disk, that's what your limitation is. I've had gigs worth of scenes as a preset, and again, the important thing there is to consider, or you're not necessarily, yes, you're duplicating the data from somewhere else to this, but the duplicated data is actually compressed. So the scene is essentially stored in a zipped form, and so it's actually much more efficient storing things that way, and it's automatically unzipped upon. So yeah, there's no limitations on any of the presets. There's no limitations on how big they could be, how many objects or file size wise. There's no limitation, none that I'm aware of at least. Or none that I've ran into when I've been using this for a while now. Model presets. So there's a lot of free libraries out there. So for example, there's a library by Bad King. I think it's badking.com or something. A lot of. I hear echo, Steve. Mute it.
That's interesting.
Can still hear echo.
That's interesting. I'm not. Hold on a minute. Let me check. Oh, nothing's on.
Well,
oh,
maybe
I don't hear an echo at all. I'm not hearing.
Okay, then it's just me. That's all right.
No, actually, it's you. I think it's picking up your microphone, your speakers.
Yeah, it could be. Let me just do this since I only need to hear myself. But okay, so Bad King, for example, there's a lot of free model libraries, a lot of paid model libraries. Bad King is one of the ones I actually like using a lot to play around. I think it's badking.com. It's a guy that stores a lot of ZBrush collections, and most of them are in OBJ formats. And we'll get into how to get them easily into LightWave in a little bit. But you can see now, there's a whole bunch of different things here. There's, in these particular case, they weren't textured. They're just model libraries. But it's a lot easier to browse through models that you might have used on particular projects visually than it is to doing that via file names on disk. And we can do, for example, there is some trees that I have converted. And these are all kinds of different, setup trees. And we'll just load one of these. So the important thing here again is also, first, when you add a preset or when you restore a preset, it asks you, do you want to keep the files external or do you want to copy them to a specific folder? Now, again, in this particular case, all the LWO and the images are all stored within the preset. So they have no external dependency. They don't look somewhere else for something. So when you recall them, you're actually being asked if you want to keep them in an external folder, which is a temporary directory that gets set up and deleted later on, or you want to copy them to a specific folder, which is something that you probably want to use most of the time because these might be stored from a specific project. Now you have set up a new project and you want to copy whatever tree it is, because you might modify it, so you want to copy that into your content folder. So by default, you just hit OK, and you can add it as a new object or you replace the selection. And again, this I'll explain a little bit later. So once we do that, you can see that here's a tree, and it looks like crap in OpenGL. So we'll bring up VPR, and you can see that there's image maps being used here. And note that you never have to point to a specific image map. It was always, since they were included in the preset, it knows where they are, it reassigns the images, it copies the images into that folder, and so you always have everything together. So it's very easy to just add, a couple different of these and load another tree, because. So in order to set up certain things, and whether that's a tree or whether it's some, let's see, there's some thing. There's other kit bash packs, which is like, 400 or 500 objects in one of these presets. And, again, those can be extremely useful when you need them, or when you just want to, play around with something. Or again, those could be objects you could have a library for an internal vault that you might have for you, where you store certain things, or it could be if you model something project specific and you feel at that point in time that you might want to reuse it, just add it to the library, and you can always recall it. When you use the tree, does it make a new submap in your current project? It does. Okay, that's where, let me just go back here to the tree. So by default, when you bring it up, it will copy it into, like, images for objects are typically stored in the images folder within your content structure. And that's where it will copy it by default. If you wanted to put it, for example, let's say trees, if you do something like that, it will make a trees folder in the images folder and copy it into there. Does it copy the images to a folder? Yeah, okay, so I think that answers that last question. So you can specify the folder either right here and this would be, if you wanted a 2-folder steep, it would be trees, whatever, pine tree or something. Now it'll create a trees folder and a pine folder inside of the images folder, and that's where it will copy it to. So but by default, if you don't have anything here, it will just copy it into the images folder. And you can also specify it, of course, here by a file name. And I think that answers all the outstanding questions. So one of the things that's also important, though, is, for example, I own the CG Access collection, and it might take a while because I think there's 3,000 objects in here. So come on, let's just wait a little bit until it brings it up. If we're on application, we can start scrolling. Actually, that's the wrong collection. Let's see, number 3. Trying to find one. Okay, so you can see in this particular case that there is a red dot on the preset. And what that means, if you read it here, it means that the external files are not embedded in the preset. So if you don't want to duplicate objects and images and stuff like that within a preset, if you're never going to pass the preset onto somebody else, maybe you're struck for space and you want to keep them in their original location and just basically make a reference. So at that point in time, when you have a preset like this, it'll indicate that this is using external files. So there's nothing stored within this preset other than the reference to the external files. So when you load that, it's a much smaller file, obviously, but it loads it from the external references. So if you had something on your network drive and you didn't want to duplicate it in preset, it will load it from that reference. Personally, I've moved away from keeping stuff external just because it's so easy now to just take any of these items and pass them on to different people and not ever have to worry about it. And also, I essentially use this now as a complete replacement for my own vault, which we used to have just a folder on disk that has, we used to have a folder on disk that has, subfolders for objects and things like that, stuff that I would normally reuse all the time. I've moved all that over to our preset library now, and all with embedded assets. That way I know it's always going to be together. Because it's very easy to sometimes move things around and forget that they might be referenced somewhere else. What if you bought 100 objects, and how can you make them all presets? Very easy. Let's just go. Unfortunately, I had so little time to prepare anything here, but let me just load one of these 3 items. And we'll do the, hold on. So we'll take something like this. Boy, sure. Actually, Yes. So how do you load these presets? So I'll start here from scratch, and we'll go to our workspace library. First, let me do a single preset where 3 items. So we'll have a toroid here. If you just wanted to add that to the presets, all you'd have to do is add current as preset. If you have embedded externals switched on, that means all the images belonging to it will also be embedded. Otherwise, you will get the red dot, and it'll reference the images and the object externally. So in this particular case, we'll just do an add preset, and you can see now that we have a toroid in here. If you want to add a whole directory, it's actually very simple, because all you do is, let's clear this, and you essentially, let's say 3 items, objects folder in here, and you just do this, and it will add all these objects, and now you have them all here in the library. So it's a very quick thing. Again, if you have VPR on, it'll make the thumbnails via VPR. But it's a very easy way of literally hundreds, or in my case with the CG Access library, I think there's 3,000 in each library. I've added them just like that. It's very easy. It's supposed to be that easy because it's not supposed to be something that you have to think about. Hopefully that answers that question. And that's the same with most presets. Well, actually, yeah, we'll do the other ones. So with the object presets, that's how you would do it. You can have certain exclusions. So if you don't want, for example, a lot of times I have things that are set up with Octane, and if you don't want to add things with Octane in the file name, you just would exclude Octane or principled. Any of these sort of things would be ignored in the file name, and they will not be added. The library folders is very useful. In this particular case, I only have one object folder. But if you had subdirectories here and you click library folders, it will create a new folder here for every subfolder. And put the files in there. So if you had a tree directory, a trees, cars, whatever kind of thing, it would then automatically sort them into the library. Because otherwise, if you do add presets and you don't have this checked, it will add them in the currently selected library. And I think that's about it. Oh, and the one thing I forgot, but actually, no, I'm not going to show that yet because same in all presets, we're going to get to that. Sorry about that. And that's object presets. Object presets also work in Modeler, and I want to go through all the presets first because there's something else that I want to show in relation to the Modeler preset. So that's Modeler presets. Any questions for that? Any other questions, I should say? Thanks, Carla, for all the questions. Helps me. So, okay, I'll move on. Now, the one thing I just added this actually, I think last week, and I wasn't going to do it first, but I was hoping that there was going to be some movement by the LightWave group itself, but since there wasn't, I just added it. Surface presets, yes, you already have them, but what you have with these surface presets is, again, the functionality of keeping all the external files. So, images, if you use image maps, especially with PBR sets and things like that, if you want to keep them all together in the surface and not having to hunt around on disk if you move it, this surface preset essentially replaces the LightWave surface preset. So this is the LightWave preset when you have the surface editor open here. Oops. On. And it's sort of important. You can see as I'm switching around, this is now the LightWave surface presets. If I switch to my model presets here, as soon as I activate the window, this context changes. And if I go to my surface presets, again, same thing. Just keep in mind, it's the same thing as what I showed with objects, but that the images are attached with it. You can add whatever you have selected in the surface editor, you can add it, and it'll zip up all the images and everything and store it in a zip format that's always contained within the preset. So this will make it a lot easier for people to share image-based PBR presets, from all kinds of different libraries, which I'm hoping more people are going to do that. There used to be, external sites of doing that, but it's always, you had to make sure that the images are in a certain folder to be able to get them back. And I always hated that. Every single time you have to hunt around for something, every time you load an object and the requester comes up, can't find images, or scene can't find objects, that has always bothered me. And that's why these things were created. Also you can search. I don't have a lot of presets here because I literally just added that last week, but you can of course search the preset system and find specific presets. It stores any surface, whether it's Octane, whether it's Cray, probably, whether it's LightWave, any surface, whatever your surface is here, whatever your surface is selected here, that's what it'll store. So there is no, it makes absolutely no differentiation between Octane or LightWave and things like that. That's the question from the chat. Does it store Octane presets? And again, they don't have to be all in the workspace folder. You can make different folders in here, and you can make different folders in here and store Octane specific, LightWave specific. Again, even project specific. A lot of this is geared towards working with other people. So when you work on a specific project, there could be shot specific surfaces. There could be shot specific objects. Things like that. So it's kind of it's almost an asset manager kind of thing, or at least it could be used as such. If you work with multiple people within the same company, but not just that, but and you want them always to be able to use the same surface, it's as simple as doing that and having everything together. That's surface presets. Again, there's not much to say on those, again, other than they essentially replace what you have here. Next preset would be IES lights, which I think is actually quite exciting. So let's go to those. The surfaces are also stored in the preset folder. Yes, and again, it's so if I go to the surfaces, 1 second. So here we have, for example, the surface library, and you get to the workspace, and here is the surface that's saved in there. Now, most of the time, you won't find them being called this. You'll find presets in this totally undecipherable name. Let's say if you go to the object model library here, this will be the that they have, and it's an internal system. It's so that you can never have a conflict of having the same preset in there twice. You can add the same preset 10 times if you want to. There's no name conflict or anything like that. It's just the internal naming of what LightWave does. So the surfaces, again, it would be just a file like that will have the surface, all the images, and anything else that might be used within that preset will be included in that. Let's leave that open. Might go back to that. IES presets. So let me bring that up. So I actually I never really used IES that much, primarily because it's a pain in the ass, because you have thousands of files, unless you have a client that has very specific IES lights, and in that case, it's much easier. But you still, when you go through them, or when you artistically go through them, you just never have an idea what they actually look like. So you usually have to use an external application, or you load them in LightWave one by one and try them out. So in this particular case, you can see like there's thumbnails. There's a library that I'm shipping with this. And the library, I think it has, let me just check, I can rebuild search index here. I think it has something like Just a second. It takes a while. I think it's something like 40,000 files or 40,000 IES lights, which probably, unless you work with client-specific IES lights, I don't think you'll ever have to look for more IES files than that. And you only have to rebuild the search index once you add something or remove something. So this is taking a little bit. But it essentially now builds an index that not just gives you the name, but also the description, and you can also search for the lumens within the IES file, so that you don't accidentally use a stadium light with, you know, whatever 20,000 lumens in a living room thing. Come on. Sorry about that. Probably shouldn't have clicked it, but that way you'll get through this. I was just mainly curious on how many files there are actually in there now. And again, that's something that I ship. And this entire library, it's one of the things, again, the IES file is, there we go, it's 43,507 files. And you can see as you hover over them, look down here where you see the name in this particular area, and you see the description in here, and it tells you how many lumens, you know, a light, for example, is. It also tells you, you know, what folder they're in or where they initially were stored from. But the important and the biggest thing is, this is how they will actually look in LightWave. So when you add an IES light, you know, you just basically point it to the IES file or a directory of IES lights, which you just point it to a root folder in it, and it'll do this for every single one of them. It'll actually create all these thumbnails for you. You don't have to set up anything. And when you're ready to use them, you just double click on them. So you can see in this particular case, I have nothing selected in my scene. If I click on one of them, it will create a new light. And that new light will be the name of whatever the IES file was, and you can now see it as an IES file. If you select a light that exists and click on one, it will load that IES light, that IES file onto, you can see right here, it will load that into the currently selected light. And again, if you want to just play around and switch different lights, you can do so by just clicking through the different, you know, lights. It's that simple. If you have a whole bunch of lights that you want to change, you can just do that and multi-select them. Everything is multi-select aware. And that's essentially, you know, IES lights. I think it will make them a lot more useful because you can just visually search what lights you're looking for, versus before, if you had 40,000 IES lights. I mean, I've seen libraries posted, but I find them useless if you don't know what they look like. And yes, you can load them into an external application, but by doing so every time, it's just time consuming. And I wanted to minimize that time that it takes to do this. And you know, that's essentially it. The IES file itself is encoded within the preset, and as you, let's see, our path is still XX. If we go to the path, you can now see that there's a lights folder in here, and when you recall them, it stores the IES preset within that folder, and that's what it's being loaded. So again, you never have to worry about where did I place that IES light file, or, you know, anything like that. And that's IES lights. Any questions about IES lights? These tools are only available as a pack. And again, that's primarily because it makes it a lot easier for me to support. I don't want to split them up. I won't split them up, actually. They're not that expensive. And again, we'll get to that towards the end. But, you know, they're just, it's easier to maintain for me. And that's all I really care about at this point in time. And again, you'll find things in here that might be of absolutely no interest to you. But that's kind of the same thing as with LightWave as a base package, where some things appeal to people and others don't. You just use, you know, whatever you have a use for. And that's IES presets. Let's make a null here. So in LightWave 2018, there were a whole bunch of different things added. So we now have volumetric, or volumes essentially, which kind of is meant to replace hypervoxels in some sort of way. But the one thing we don't have with this is we don't have a preset system. So that's one of the things, again, where I thought like there's an opportunity to store whole presets. So if we go to the volume presets, and again, there's volume and volumetric presets. Keep those in mind that they're separate. So if we go to volumes here, you can see like, you know, any of them. We'll just copy. And again, if there's images or anything like that that belong to the preset, because, you know, there might be textures that you're using to displace them or anything like that, you can copy them to the external content folder, or to the current content folder. So here it's just a simple, you know, cloud. Now the reason why it looks different here is just because the lighting was different when I created the preset. If you wanted to switch to the layers kind of thing, you can see here's my layers that are sort of set up, and or a little bit of a swirl. And, you know, and those are just, again, in here itself, you have different setups that you can store. And, you know, if you don't want to recreate them every time, or again, if you find something that you might want to reuse, then that's sort of what the volume presets are for this specific branch. And, you know, some of you might think it's pretty funny, because actually Steve's question is, why isn't NewTek on your door to work for them? You know, look, there's a lot of different things, and I hear a lot of things that say this should be native, and, you know, you can certainly make a point for that some of this should be native. But the other point, or the other angle I want you to think about, is having this ability to do this as a third party, as an independent third party developer, allows us to do things that, you know, you might have not initially, or that NewTek actually might not have initially thought of. You know, and we'll get to some of these to some of these when we get to some of the other preset modes. It's just, I can do certain things that NewTek might not have thought of in a specific preset, and you know, it's easy to say, well, we'll just request it. You know, well, whatever you just did, you know, can we just request it and get that added? And it's like, sure, eventually you can get it added, but it takes a lot longer. You know, NewTek is a much bigger company. There's procedures in place. I don't have to work within those procedures, and with that, I have a lot more freedom in what I do. Plus, I come from a production background. You know, I'm not a hardcore programmer or anything like that. I'm a production artist. You know, and with that, so my tools are based on that. But those were volume presets. Again, you can search them if you wanted to add a preset, if you wanted to make, you know, this, something like that, a new preset. And let's just do something silly. And we'll just say a new preset. And that's, you know, that's all you have to do to add them. And now we have essentially added one. Carlos asking if there's a website where people share presets. Currently, no. Well, there is ODRoot, which is something that I can get into in the very end of this presentation, which is kind of my hope that people will share things there. And, you know, presets could be shared free, which, you know, I'd hope a lot of people would do. But also there could be a paid aspect of it. So if somebody wants to do a pro pack or things like that, really some of it, I look at what William Wan has done for Modo in the Polystyrene kit, and all the different people that have, you know, released all these kits, some of them free, some of them paid for. This is something that I kind of hope will happen with this. I don't need or want a part of those sales. It's just I want to give people the opportunity to share these things, to make it a better community and just a better platform. Because I really do think that this preset system is a little bit of a game changer on how you work and how quickly you can work. Moving on to volumetric presets. Again, volumetric presets is something really, really cool that was added to LightWave. So it's as simple as, let's just make this a quick area light here. And make it visible to camera. And around, rotate this around a little bit. Let's see, so here's my light. So volumetric presets is really cool in LightWave because all you really have to do is click this button. And, so you have a nice, atmospheric type thing. But again, there's no presets for any of these kind of things. So I'll do something, or I'll show the volumetric presets next. And it's very simple. Same UI as you've always had. And you can see I have a couple different presets here. So you can just click on them and you get, let me just change this light a little bit. So you can kind of see now you have this sort of, animated FDM. It's actually animated, so there's some motion to it. Hard to show this way, but there's a turbulence type effect. You can even set things up where you go to the camera here and zoom out a little bit. You can even set things up where the camera is linked to the color is linked to the distance. So we can do something like that, and you can see as I move closer, the light actually gets yellow, and it goes more red as I go further away. And that's just, again, set up, via a simple node graph, where I take the item, which is the camera and the light, and pipe them into a gradient. But again, the main thing is presets. It's something very easily to recall. You play around with something that you like, you just store it real quick, and that's essentially it. Presets. Is there a video on how to get them started as there extra software installs before you can use them? There is some other software that's required to use some of these, and primarily, actually most of the ones that you see here, no, but I'm just about to get into some of the other presets where I'll come back to that question. That's volume presets. Again, very simple. It's just since we don't have preset systems here, I wanted to create them because I found myself to be reusing like certain fog setups or things like that, all the time. And with this way, it's a nice way to store them. Now we're going to get into something, again, still presets. Sorry about that. But I think those are incredibly. Steve, you're sharing a calendar.
No, I'm not.
Don't think I'm not watching.
It was an accident. I took it away.
So I'm just gonna make a quick thing here. Always spheres, but hey, it's easy.
By the way, you're doing great with interacting with everybody.
I'm trying. I like the questions, so it's good. Keep them coming,
okay.
And make sure I answer them. Hold me accountable. So one of the biggest things is, one of the biggest things, they're all big. Image presets can be extremely annoying. I found myself throughout the years acquiring quite a few texture libraries, and unfortunately, when I'm actually working on a project, a lot of times I go to Google to find something, because it's typically inherently difficult to keep track of what textures you have, and you might remember having a folder where a texture might be in, but to just browse them it's just Google is easier. That's the simple solution. Until sort of this now, because you can think like I have a whole bunch of different texture libraries here, and for example, different cloths. So these are all images that I have in my library. There is, if you want, for example, the Pixar library, which I think is a freely available library. And these are all thumbnails that are essentially, you can see actually down here again, you can see where the files actually came from. So that's a Pixar, library that I think either bought or purchased or received from them at some point in time, maybe with RenderMan. I don't quite remember. But it's essentially, it shows you where they are. It shows you what the image resolution is as you hover over them. And that's, again, as simple as you can add a single texture, or you can add a whole directory with recursive directories. So if you, like me, have a texture folder on my network drive that's all categorized and things like that, That's how I added, a lot of these, and they're not all in there, but a lot of them are in there, just because it makes it a lot easier to find certain textures. To recall them, if you want to add them to LightWave, all you really do is you double click on them, and you have the same sort of requester where it gets copied to the content folder if you want, which is again your images folder or subcontent folder. But you can also apply the image to selected surfaces. And if the image is part of a set, so like for example, the images has a bump, like it would be called image underscore bump, image underscore normal, image underscore, whatever it is, and the delimiter is definable, then it will load actually the set of textures. And this is not to import PBR textures or anything like that. It's just a quick way of getting these images in. So for example, I'm going to unclick all of these. So if we just do this, if you go to your image editor, you can see that texture is loaded. Again, you don't have to worry about where that texture is stored. It's just, the preset knows all of that, and it's just being loaded. Now, if we actually select the surface here, and you can see, because I switched the surface, the preset context changed, so I have to go back to images. Let's take this image right here. Now we're going to keep at selected surfaces. And what you can find now is that the image has been added to this material. It hasn't been connected because I don't know how you want that image connected, but it saves you the time of going back into here and clicking here and that kind of stuff. It's been added twice. I have to look why that is. But that's essentially the same thing, and it names the node to whatever the image node was. So it's very easy to see and watch that way. So it's just a very fast way of getting images in. And if you go back to the images here, and for example, you want to let's do a search thing of cardboard. Oops, and yeah, there you go. Perfect demo. I have to look into that. That should work. Oh, most likely, because I don't have a texture index. So I'll do that. Sorry, that's going to take a while again, because there's quite a few textures in here. But what it'll allow you to do is it'll, again, do a search string, and if it works, which I'm hoping it does, it will give you a specific, a filtered folder with just those images in there. And come on. I think there might be more than IES bytes in here, so that could take a little bit. Oh, there we go. It's not quite as many, 30,000. So let me try this again. So search for cardboard. There you go. You have to have the search index rebuilt or built once at least. And I change things all the time, so I probably remove the search index at some point in time. But now you have a folder that always has, whether it's in the file name itself of the image or in the description of the image, there will be something with cardboard in it. And you can see it's a filtered library now. And you could just go and rename that library to cardboard images. So it's very easy within here to actually create new folders. That's how a lot of these kind of things were done. Unfortunately, there's no drag and drop and things like that, because I'm not rewriting how the preset system works within LightWave. I'm just using the preset systems to store other things. And you can see if you want to go back to the filter, there you go. And that's essentially the image presets. And yeah, like I said, the biggest thing is, again, library folders. So you can see these were in a folder called Cardboard Textures and Objects. All I had was I pointed to my root texture folder and put the lib folders in, and essentially it will just create a lib folder for that. The searchability is what I wish all databases had. Yeah, I know. Can you search metadata for? Can you search for metadata of the images itself? No, you can't. That's something I could potentially add. However, that would probably also be very, very slow. The search in this is extremely fast because all it really has to do, it doesn't actually look at the image itself. It just looks at, you know, the data that was stored with the image. So you can, in this particular case, the description metadata essentially, and the file name metadata. That's all that's being searched. And again, all my preset systems are searchable at least, you know, but yeah, I wish all databases at any point in time had this searchability. That's texture presets, image presets really. We're almost done with the presets, so bear with me just a little bit longer. Let's clear scene. So another thing that let's see, HDR presets. HDR presets, yeah. Very important. You know, the workflow has changed a little bit with SIBL, or if people that are aware of the SIBL edit and things like that from Christian Block. You know, I used that for the longest time, but you know, there's a lot of changes in 2018 where you don't really need that anymore, or where there's better ways to do it. And so in this particular case, I have a whole bunch of different, you know, HDR sets. I actually converted all the civil sets, but there's a free library, HDR Haven, which is really fantastic. I mean, they're 1K to 16K images, I think. It's freely available, but there's a lot of different HDRs. And also, if you have shot your own HDRs, you can have your own library. And again, just being able to see them visually is something that's, I think, very, very beneficial. Let's just call it that way, for lack of better terms. To add a preset, you just click a single HDR and you'll be presented with a file name. You know, just click the HDR and it'll do it for you. You can also add an entire recursive directory. I can guarantee you there's 195 in this. I didn't do them by hand. I literally just selected that folder with the recursive HDRs, and it'll go through the entire folder and makes presets. So the nice thing about it is, and this is kind of, well, actually, going back to a question earlier, if there are any dependencies, external tools that need to be downloaded to use this, this is one of the places where, yes, you do. And if you go under the menu here, there's a preset tool config, and it requires 2 programs, and they're both freely available. So I put the link in here. I can't distribute them really, at least not nconvert. That's something that you have to download. But once you download them, all you have to do is put them, you know, in the preset config here. And if you've never used this, but you just run the HDR configs or any other tool that uses it, it'll automatically come up with this requester and ask you to put the paths in for this. But once you have that done, and it's essentially for tone mapping is one of the tools that's needed so that these look nice. Otherwise, they'll be always in linear space, and they just won't look as nice. And the other one is nconvert, is I use to make little thumbnails for adding them in here. But so here's one of the reasons, coming back to another question, like why you know, should this be native and things like that. And I'm sure it's very easy for the LightWave group to make some incarnation of this that would be native. But where the benefit of a third party doing this comes in, so if we just load one of them, you can see there's a whole GUI that comes up here. And these are choices that a third party developer can make of what you want the user to have access to. Or once you added this preset, I want certain other things to happen. And this could be completely custom. It's whatever I desire it to be, and it's of course based on user feedback. But you know, it's something that we can control. And as a third party, if there's a user request for something, I can add that user request in no time versus you having to wait for another build down the line, or another, you know, LightWave release down the line. So that's where some of this is absolutely beneficial to have. But the HDR presets, again, you have the old style, or not the same thing as you have in all the other presets. you want to copy the HDR to the content folder. This sets up an environment texture. So if you had one previously, you can clear it because most of the time you don't want to have it's one or the other. You can have the environment affect the diffuse and affect specular. You can have the multiple importance sampling for lights set to a certain range. You can say to remove all the other lights, and you can also add a shadow catcher ground plane. So by default, it's kind of this, and I don't actually remember what I clicked, so let me just click one of these here. And what you'll see, it looks like nothing happened, but it set up the environment light. That's the icon for an environment light. It sets up a little radio thing so you can kind of adjust the orientation of the HDR. And if we go into HDR here, you can now see that, you can now see that, we have this HDR setup. And what you might not be able to see, but you will notice immediately as we add another object, is that also a ground plane is set up. So, you can, and that's by just clicking one of these and saying, yep, I want to, set up a ground plane. So if you want to switch it out, you just go to the next one, and now you swapped another HDR. You can swap something else. And that's how easy and quick you can, swap out these little things. And it just makes it a lot more fun working with them because you already can see a preview, because not always will you know what HDR you want to use. Sometimes depending on what kind of work you're doing, you just want to experiment a little bit. And this makes experimenting a lot faster and a lot more fun. Any questions for these presets? And again, you can search, once you rebuild the search index. Let's just do that real quick. It's only 1,000. Well, actually, it's 1,058 HDRs. Is there a preset system for HDR Light Studio? I have not done that, no. This is different because what it does is it sets up your texture environment. So when you load that up, you can see that it basically puts the texture environment light in here, and it links it to. You can see down here there's a couple different objects. So the controller here, which let me just do an OpenGL overlay here. So as I'm moving that around now, you can see that the HDR will move as well. So it's just an easier way to link versus having to go in here and adjusting the rotation. So all that is being set up for you, which I think that's essentially the same way on what SIVL used to do. It's just now making use of the environment light and things like that. So it's just an updated system. But again, I find it very useful. What else? Okay, fiber effects, same thing. A lot of people hate it. I certainly used to be one of them. Through 2018, I've come to like it a lot more. But one of the issues is always, you want to recall something. You've set something up on one character, and it's like, oh my God, to get that to the other character, it's always a pain in the butt. And so we're going to go to the fiber effects presets. And so the cool thing about this is you can see I have a whole bunch of different presets set up, and you can just by quickly loading it, it'll do a few things where we're going to skip the first one for now. It'll set up brute force GI because they're incredibly slow. Like fibers and instancing does not work very well with interpolated radiosity. So in case you're using interpolated radiosity, it will automatically set a per object use brute force GI to make it workable at least. You can compensate the depth, the length, and the density because a lot of times you will set up a small little object and you set up a big object, and you want to use the same sort of setup, but they all behave differently in terms of length, and so one setup that you might have done on a 1 meter sphere is going to look completely ridiculous on a 10 centimeter or on a regular size head. And so, I wanted to get rid of all of that so that it's easy for people to just reuse presets. So if you load that in, you can see that, essentially, now let me turn off the OpenGL overlay. So you kind of have that set up. But if you wanted to look at any of the other ones, if you wanted to have like a purplish type, setup, you just click on here and you replace it, and it's that simple. Now the cool thing about this is I've just added the purple, but I also have a red one here. Let's say you don't want to replace it, but you want to add it as an existing layer. You just click Add to Existing Layer, and that now will essentially add that preset to the purple preset that we had. And that's extremely beneficial because now every preset that you save, and again, you could save this as a preset. So if we like this purple, orange, we just save it as a preset. And there we go. We've now just added that. And so it's cool because now you can start thinking in terms of layers in fiber effects. You might have like a peach fuzz preset. You might have a long hair preset. You might have a short hair preset that you might want to mix. And so with this functionality, you can now do that. It doesn't matter the amount of fiber effects here. Any of these anything that's essentially in this panel. Again, if images are being used, they're always going to be embedded in it, so you don't have to worry about it. Any of those sort of things are always stored together. So as a user, it's literally as simple as clicking. You don't have to worry about anything else. And I think this makes fiber effects a lot more useful, just because it allows you to get to a base setup that looks cool very, very quickly. Whereas if you use the starting from scratch, if we go to do the same exact sphere and you just add fiber effects to it, you will probably at some point in time, you just won't like it very much, and you'll get frustrated because you might not know, you might just want to try to do something really quick, but you might not know how to get there. But by just being able to, like here's a little brownish preset, just by changing that, you'll get to something that is much more usable within a much shorter amount of time. And again, if you wanted to layer some of the other ones, if you wanted to layer like something like this, you can do that. So you can literally mix and match, and any of the mix and matches could be made into another preset. It's completely up to the user, on what you want to do. So that's fiber effects presets. Any questions there? I think there's only like 2 people watching because there's only 2 people with questions.
You have almost 50 people watching. People are enjoying your presentations. If you're coming through really clear, which you are, then people won't have that many questions. But they're just watching and enjoying. It's like let's see, IG Twitch says amazing. Other people, No, you've got questions.
Okay, let's move on because there's so much more. There's my favorite one is coming up. So
all right, cool. Now you have 15 minutes before we go to break. Just to give you a warning.
No, don't do the break yet. I want to get through the preset system.
You have 15 minutes.
I'm gonna try to be very quick.
All right.
Just because this is people will love this one, I think. So that was the fiber effects preset system. Now my favorite one, and probably might be one of the most frustrating things that people had encountered. And I'm just gonna go real quick to it again. Hopefully people don't get tired of my little shapes here, but so the next thing is the instancing preset system, and that's like I said, it's probably one of my favorites. I have a couple different objects here, and you can see, like, for example, I have a simple grass preset here that was done. So I'm just going to click that. It's as simple as it is. I selected a sphere, and I'm just going to click that. And again, it asks you, do you want to copy them to the current content folder, and do you want to keep the existing setup and admin instancers? At this point in time, it doesn't matter because we don't have anything. So we're just going to hit OK. And what you'll see, notice the distribution here. It might be hard to see in the via the stream, but it's not all the way dense, but it's fairly dense. So if we go to the instancing setup here, or if we go to, so there you go, you can see that that distribution remains the same, whatever it was. Now in LightWave land, if I go to the instancer setup now and I hit copy here and I paste that onto the toroid, you can see that the distribution is completely different because it's surface distribution, and LightWave doesn't really account for that. So to be able to reuse instancer setups before this was always a pain, because now you'd have to adjust the instances to have more instances and things like that, and that's kind of always been a nightmare. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to have the toroid selected and click the same exact preset. And what you realize now is that it actually has the exact same distribution. So, you can see there's some panels here and some things here. So that makes it incredibly useful, because now you can apply a specific setup that's based on, in this particular case, this instancer setup is based on surface density, or is based on surface assignment. It just makes it easy to reuse at any point in time. So if you also see that I have a flower set up here, if I want to add these flowers and I want to keep the existing, well, actually, yeah, let's say I want to keep the existing grass, I click this button, and now you added the flowers as a layer to our preset system. And you can, of course, save that as a new preset at any point in time. So, let's add some rocks, keep. And so now we have some presets set up here. You can also make this a lot more complicated. And this is kind of where we're going to bring up a new object. This is a tool that I'm going to get into if we have some time later on. So this is just a simple plane, but it has a UV on it. And I have another preset here that's based on colors. So what I'm going to do is just, again, this is one single plane. You can see there's nothing else in the scene. I'm going to load one of these color presets. And so essentially what's happening here is that it's done all of the setup. It loaded all the objects that, all these objects that belong to that preset. It loaded all the images that belong to any of the object and puts them all in the content folder. You don't have to do anything else. And the distribution here is set up based on an image map. So, in this particular case, in the instancer itself, if we go to, for example, here, go to the nodes, there's a couple different things where, in this particular case, what am I keying? So the pink, so that's for the grass, I believe. Yeah. So the grass is being used as a weight, the pink color is being used as a weight map for the grass. So the nice thing about this is, if I bring up Photoshop, or actually, let's just do Affinity Photo. And this is something for people that have to do ecosystems. So if you're an archivist and you have to have, you have a certain area with trees, a certain area with rocks, certain area with, whatever it might be, even houses, buildings, things like that, then this is kind of for you, I think. So if I load this color map, I believe it's an XXX images, and here we see the color map. And let's just, modify it a little bit. So we're going to apply, and for people that have watched the video, I do this, all the time, but actually, let's see, distort, where is it here? Twirl, something like that. And so we're just going to twirl this a little bit. And you, of course, you could paint more, you could put some in. Maybe I'll do that just to prove a point. We're just going to add a little bit of red here. Now we're going to export that image. And it's a JPEG, so export. And we're going to overwrite the original one here. And we're going to go back to LightWave. And what you will see immediately in LightWave, and this is another nice feature that was added in 2018, if an image gets updated, that if an image gets updated externally, it'll automatically be reloaded in LightWave as soon as you switch to it. So now we've changed the surface assignment to something like that. And you can see I painted the little red part. The red part is where the flowers are, so we have these little flowers in there. And that's just by saving one preset now that you could easily change, or the layout of it you could easily change by just this color image that's being mapped. If you didn't like it, if you like everything but you don't like this particular tree, you can just go to that tree, and let's go back to our object model presets. And obviously this doesn't have to be a tree now, but I'm just going to use another tree and put like a palm tree here. So again, I have the object selected, select one of the palm trees, and instead of adding as a new object, we're going to replace the selection. And as soon as you do that, you now have palm trees that are there. So it's incredibly easy to swap some of these things out and change them backwards, forwards, sideways, whatever you desire. And the biggest thing is you're not spending a lot of time setting it up. That's the kind of message I guess I'm trying to get across. You've set it up once and you want to be able to reuse it easily anywhere else. So that's the instance of presets. Let's see. How much time do I have before? Do I have 5 more minutes? You have 7 more minutes before we go lunch, or before you want to do a break?
You've got 10 minutes before break.
Okay. If the color image is animated, does it animate the instant distribution? Yes, it does. And you don't even have to necessarily animate the image outside of LightWave, but with Mike Wolf's the DBW nodes. For this, you also need the DBW core node. Yeah. So yeah, this setup makes use of Michael Wolf's back to the plane here of the DBW nodes. It's a free tool set, which is amazing. And we were talking about this, and he basically came up with this in no time. I highly recommend it. Again, it's free. Please use it. If you do use it, write him a nice little message. His work really is invaluable with this kind of stuff. But you can also, use there's other nodes that he has where you can actually rotate the texture or whatever it is and actually animate it even within LightWave. But of course, if you're used to doing it externally and you want to just use an image sequence, yes, the distribution will change based on the image sequence. And all you would have to do is take this color image and replace it with the image sequence. The only thing obviously that's important would be the colors, that you use the same colors. Otherwise, you'd have to go into the instancer and reset up the colors. But that should be easy to do, especially if you're doing it internally, because again, there'll be some sort of pipeline or process that you have set up. Can you gradually fade out shapes having hard edge? Yes, you can. There's some fuzzy keying in there. So the keyer itself has some fuzzy selections in there, but you could also blur that, and yes, it's completely, because it's just driving it as a weight, and this is just a matte. So if the weight fades, essentially this is just a black and white image at that point in time. So if it fades towards black, then you would get that sort of distribution. Hopefully that answers the question. Shoot, what can I do in 5 minutes? In only 5 minutes. Stop all the instancer work. Okay, just real quick, because that way I can go back to the instancer. 1 second here. Motion presets. Important because, second here, go. Motion presets. So I just have just a regular. There's no animation. There's no character or anything like that. But just to show you very quickly motion presets. Motion presets. There's a few different things. You have 4 different types. So you have a motion, which is just something that you would use as safe motion, load motion. You have envelopes. So for single item envelopes like light intensity, things like that, you have hierarchical motion, which is basically the entire hierarchy, which I'm going to show now. And then you also have poses, so you can save specific poses for a character. So if I go to the maximum block, sure. And a nice thing about it is the hierarchical motions is if I select all the bones here, and those were like, there's about 4,000 motions here, and they were free by Maximo. I always get them mixed up, Miximo and Maximo. But there are all these motions, so you can see I only have the T-pose in here. But if I click on any of them, you can now see, now I have this other animation loaded, anything that I choose to. So here's a yawn animation. So that's just, I guess, he's yawning. There's a little bit of yelling. And again, you see, I'm just clicking on them. So the cool thing is, though, let's pick something that's a little bit more, okay. So you can see what, if you focus on what he does with his arm here. If I now select any of the others, let's just take the right arm here, right shoulder all the way here. And let's take another motion, so the yawn, which his arm was just down essentially. You can now see that it's essentially combined the motion. So only you can see that's the motion from the arm at some point in time. So when you recall one of the presets, especially when you recall one of the presets, only the selection that you have selected will be recalled. So it doesn't overwrite all of the animation and all the different bones that might be within that preset, but only what's selected. And then of course you can store that as another preset. So if you like this and you want to just store that as a preset, combined, for example, oops, caps lock on. So you can just store that as another preset. Oh, and I store it as a motion, but I want to store it as an H motion. And you can see now we have a combined preset. So if we go to, let's just load something else. Here's, for example, walking motions. These are just walking motions. Oops. And you want to make sure that you select all of them. There we go. And so here's some sort of walking motion. But if you want to go back to the combined one that we just saved, you just click on here. And it did not work. Ha! Another great demo effect. So that one I have to check why that doesn't work. In theory, that should have just now loaded that animation. You can do things, sorry about that, I'm going to look what that is and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to go into, real quick, a light intensity thing here, make an envelope. And you can see, for example, green are envelopes. So for example, an animation that I always use for lights that are off to flicker on, essentially. So you can just double click on that and it'll ask you to the light intensity here. And you can see as soon as that's loaded in, now you have this envelope that's loaded. And so it's very easy to, any sort of motion type animation to store and recall. Okay, you want to do a 5-minute break?
Yep, let's go for it.
It's up to you. I don't need it.
Well, no, it's not for you. Not everything's about you. We got our users. Maybe they need to take a break. All right, guys. So how about this? We always do a little 15-minute break. Kind of stand up.
15? That's too long. 15 is too long. 5 minutes.
No.
I got a lot of
15. Yeah, 15 minutes is perfect. It works for everybody every time. They always greatly appreciate it and thank me for it. You want to go to 10? I'll give you 10. 10 minutes is all you get. 10-minute break then. Since
10 is good.
10 is fine. All right, 10 minutes. 15 is good for me because I'm presenting. You're like an animal.
Okay, 10. And if anybody has questions, ask them. Ask away.
Ask. Okay. All right. Cool. So, guys, what I'm going to do is real quick is I'm going to stop the recording. So you're going to be getting 2 separate recordings, part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to stop this recording now.